The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Fount. Today, we're going to take a look at the what may or may not have been a hot mic moment between the El Salvadoran Anyway, the dictator who says that he is the coolest dictator in the world, whatever that might actually mean, running the world's apparently most, or one of the most horrendous prisons in the world, Bolsonaro and of El Salvador, and the current president Trump of the Trump regime in the United States, where Trump was heard discussing opening more facilities, 5 more in El Salvador, to house homegrown people, and sending American citizens to El Salvador to be put in prison, presumably for life. And Trump's staff laughed, apparently finding that very, very amusing. And so what do you both have on that? I just, how quick, given that everything with Trump seems to be moving along extremely quickly, how quickly do you think something like this might happen, and who do you think the targets might be?
So clearly Trump said that he wants people who hit people with baseball bats, old ladies with baseball bats, and those who shove people onto a train when the train is coming. These are both cases, I believe, that happened in the 70s or 80s that he remembers in his dim memory. And so those are the things that he's saying that he's focused on. Clearly, anybody who disagrees with the president would be in danger of being sent down to this concentration camp.
And, to put it into context, this is a quote from what he was saying, was cut on the hot mic. This is Trump talking to the El Salvadorian president. They love you. They love what you do. Well, I'm not sure it's important. I want them to do you. Sometimes it's a little difficult to read what Trump says. The homegrown criminals are next. Yeah, I said homegrown criminals are next. The homegrowns. You've got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right. Yeah, it's not big enough. No. Yeah, come on. This is from the guy that made English the national, signed an executive order to make English the national language. I mean, that's most, just reading it is impossible. But, I mean, it gives you the sense of what's going on. Homegrown criminals. What does he mean by it? Who knows? I don't think anybody knows.
You know.
Well, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's anyone that is a threat, which is a normal thing for dictators. It's the academics. It'll be them. Eventually, it'll be the clergy, the non-Christian, not far right wing nut job clergy will be all right. But there's your standard clergy are going to have a little trouble. Again, I've always said they go after these people that you think, oh yeah, they deserve to go. They never stop. They eventually come after somebody else. They're going to find a reason why you're a threat. And they're going to come after you. And that's just the way it goes. So it's hard to tell because there's really no direction here. Right now, it's easy to say, well, they're going after who they think are MS-13, these other gangs that are supposedly running cities in Colorado, which nobody knows about. At least nobody that lives in those cities know anything about. In a way, it's kind of like following a ping pong match in China, where the ball's going so doggone fast, you can't even keep track of it anymore. You can't even keep track because there's no clear definition of purpose. other than the general definition of, well, we got to kick the illegals out. And now we can't even define who's an illegal.
And look, this is an immigration law, right? That's allowing the administration to deport people. There's no immigration law that covers U.S. citizens. And so they're going to have to find another law, but they look for other laws. I mean, they dug up this, what's it called again? The law to send people away from, 1898 law, whatever it was that they found.
The Alien Enemies Act?
The Alien Enemies Act, exactly. Whenever that was from, they dug that one up. Nobody's used that one in a while, so nobody really had a ready response to it. But I love what Justice Sotomayor wrote. She said the implication that the government's position is not only non-citizens, but United States citizens could be taken off the streets, forced onto planes, and confined to foreign prisoners with no opportunity with redress. That is a good reason to be really against what's going on right now with the non-citizens being taken out, is because, yes, we're next, and there's going to be nobody to speak for us. It is, the slippery slope this country is on right now is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is only the beginning. And yeah, we need 5 more prisons down there because we're going to have a lot more people to go down. And, from what I've seen in that of the pictures of that prison, that would probably be cruel and unusual punishment, which is against the Constitution. It's illegal to expatriate U.S. citizens for a crime. We have a court system and a penal system here for that very purpose. It is just. I'll give you another one. Trump signed in 2018 the First Step Act, right? What they're supposed to do is house federal inmates as close to their homes as possible so that their families can visit them. And said that anyone housed farther than 500 miles from their home needs to be moved to a closer facility. That's in the First Step Act that Trump championed and signed in 2018. And now they're going to send people to El Salvador? They're going to strip people of U.S. citizenship? They're going to, they treat us like we're non-people with no due process, with no access to a court or a lawyer or a judge. I mean, this is, these are sick things that everybody should be up in arms against all the time. But what we're seeing, and Mark, you mentioned this in another podcast, is some of the Trump signs are coming down. I have Trump supporting friends. They're not participating in our group chats when we talk about what's going on in the country right now. They're being awfully quiet. And I think that's the phase that we're in. We're in the quiet phase where you just kind of distance yourself from the administration. And they haven't quite gotten to the point where we were from the get-go, where we're completely against what's going on and willing to speak out against it. But since Bibi Netanyahu has been back in power in Israel, not after 10/7, but before that, every Thursday night, all over the country, there have been protests, massively attended protests every Thursday night in Israel to get Bibi out of there because of what he was doing to their justice system and their Supreme Court there. And so that predated the attacks on October 7th and continues to this day. Every Thursday night, we're going to have something like that. Is it working? Clearly, it hasn't worked in Israel. He's still there, and it probably won't work here. But you've got to show up.
Exactly.
For this, yeah.
And like I say, you got to show up at the polls. It is right now. We're in mid-April, 2025. In a year and a half, there's going to be another election. If you don't like it that much, then you've got to decide to make a change, and you can't just vote down the party lines. You've got to make informed decisions and decisions that are right for you. You see the way it's going. If you don't like it, if you keep doing the same old thing in the hope of a different result, that's the definition of insanity. It's not working. And we talked about last week about at what point do people begin to see, how bad it is. And we talked about the idea of being in a cult's a lot like being an alcoholic. You have to reach rock bottom. Everybody has their own rock bottom. But as Scott mentioned in the last podcast, driving through, my rural area in South Carolina, where there was Trump flags all over the place, you didn't find very much Biden or Harris or anything. It was all Trump stuff. You don't see it anymore. It's all started to come down. So maybe they're starting to see the light. And there's very few of my friends that I interact with that they're very proud to say, yeah, hey, I voted for Trump. Not so much anymore. Not quite so much, because they see the chaos. And even though they try to, and still some of them try to turn themselves into a pretzel to defend, the policy, and they've now got a new kind of way to present it. I like the policy. I don't like the way it's being done. Yes, I want to get rid of illegal immigrants. Yes, I believe that's important, although they're not thinking that all the way through. But how it's being done now is something that is beginning to concern them. They like the policy, but not the methodology. And, that's something that if that's their rock bottom, the methodology, not the cruel policy, okay, fine, I'll take that as a win. But I truly do think that some people, and I've seen it here in South Carolina, and I am in one of the most conservative areas of South Carolina that exists. Bob Jones University is no more than 20 minutes from my house. You don't get any. I mean, that's like the Harvard of Liberty University. I mean, it's really, really conservative university. But you don't see a lot of it anymore. And I think that's important. Maybe it's a turning point, maybe not. Maybe not.
Well, so I think that probably most of the people that we know who are Trump supporters support the policies as far as like immigration is concerned. And
Sure.
they may be for the idea of the trade war because they believe this idea that somehow we're being treated unfairly on the world stage when it comes to trade, which I would question myself, but that's the way they think. They can't, I think, like what's going on with the way that this is being handled, right? I mean,
Right.
the tanking of the stock market, the tanking now of the bond market, the utter chaos, the crazy contradictory statements from different people in the administration when it comes to justifying trade, tariffs or whatever it is that they're talking about is so incoherent that you have to kind of question whether there really is a policy at all there or it's just madness, right? And so I think eventually that will be the thing that turns this. Probably not Abrego Garcia, sadly enough, right? Because we're all completely appalled by it. But there are people who think, yeah, he came to this country illegally. So what? A judge gave him protected status because going back to El Salvador was essentially a death threat. The guy came here when he was 16 years old. He fled violence in his own country to come here and got protected status from one of our judges for it, and has lived by the agreement that he checks in every year and that he, gets a job and he's gotten married and he's got kids. And, he looks like he's on his way to being a good citizen. But one of the things about being a good citizen in the United States is that you exercise your First Amendment rights to protest or to speak up when you see something that you don't like. And we're seeing other people who are also not getting broad support right? These Palestinian guys or the people who are speaking out against, for even pro-Hamas or just pro-Palestinian, who are not getting broad support, but they're getting thrown out of the country. One guy, when he was like on his way to get his citizenship or be interviewed for his citizenship, other people for just speaking out. That is as un-American as it gets to stop people from expressing themselves. Last night we saw it at Marjorie Taylor Greene's town hall meeting where 3 people got tased apparently for speaking out against her. So we're seeing the erosion of being an American here. But the only thing that's going to change the most hardcore people's minds is when their wallet gets hit and when their money goes away and when their opportunities go away. And we're beginning to see that. And maybe that will be the thing that turns this country around and gets people to start getting out on the streets and joining us because they don't like what's going on with the economy. And that was a little convoluted, but
no, it wasn't.
Try to find a reason why somebody should hate somebody who's hateable. And that's one reason,
Well, and that's like one of my friends said, "Well, you hate Trump," and the bottom line is, not really. I mean, I don't know the man. I think he cheats at golf. That would make him very popular in my book. I think he's a complete idiot. So they convolute the idea of disagreeing when it comes to Trump with hating him. I'm my friend from across the street, would always say to me, "You hate Trump. You hate Trump." And I said, "Well, I go if he was we were on a golf course and he was the hole ahead of me in the fairway, yeah, I'd probably hit and aim for him. But then again, with my aim, I'd miss anyway, so it would be the difference. You hate Trump, okay, whatever." But when Biden got in, first thing that this non-American permanent resident said was, "That asshole Biden." Now, if I said, "Gee, you hate Biden," "Oh no, I don't. I just think he's an asshole." Oh, so it's okay to go that way, but it's all right. So, I mean, that's the attitude. And a really dear friend of mine who's a prosecutor here, he'll always say to me, "You hate Trump." I don't hate him. I think that his policies are horrible. I think he's an absolutely horrible president. I think he's a terrible human being. I wouldn't let any of my daughters near him or my granddaughters. But as far as hate him, I haven't reached that point. You have to, do something specific, like, I don't know, molest my wife. Now I'm going to hate you. Now you're going to find me hating you. But it isn't to that. And, but everybody seems to equate it like that. And I think Scott's right. And I think that it's going to be the economy that's going to tell. It is a shame that the Garcia case is not something that people are going to, get in full arms about. It's sort of like the George Floyd case. There was a lot of people, Black Lives Matter, they got out there, but there was a lot of people that just didn't seem to care because it was just one person into them a faraway place that didn't impact their lives at all. Yeah, it was a tragedy. Gee, that's too bad. But I'm not going to invest myself into it too much. And that's what most of the American people do, unless it's right there in front of them, unless it impacts their pocketbook, unless it directly impacts their family. They don't care. They'll give the cursory thoughts and prayers. They'll do that. Same thing with the school shootings. Yeah, that's a terrible thing, but it's not my community. My community, that doesn't happen in until it does happen in your community. And even if it does happen in your community, if you have no children in that school, okay, that's bad, but really didn't impact me at all. I don't care. And that's the attitude of Americans. Unless something directly impacts them, they just have this apathy toward what's going on around them. And that's really what the shame is. I mean, that's really the tragedy of democracy. And that apathy was shown in 2024. Trump should never have got elected. How that happened it defies all logic. The founding fathers must be rolling in their graves. But that
Yeah.
should never happen.
Because the founding fathers, as somebody said, didn't build a throne. They built guardrails, and these guardrails have fallen down
Right.
largely especially in this particular case, where Congress is saying almost nothing except for Senator Von Holland from Maryland, who's going down to El Salvador to see Abrego Garcia, if not to bring him back, and the courts are finding themselves at a place where they're trying to use language to walk a midline, right? So the Supreme Court says facilitate, not effectuate, because I guess effectuate would mean that it's interfering in foreign policy, which is the domain of the executive branch and the chief executive. So they say facilitate, which the Trump people take to mean, we won't stop it if it happens. We'll facilitate it. We'll send an airplane, but we're not going to order our vendor here to return this guy, which they've done 9 times in 9 other cases. Told him, oh no, we need these people back, but they're not doing it for this guy because this guy is the George Floyd of this year. He is going to be the one who's going to galvanize people, and hopefully he's got a better future than George Floyd had. But I certainly wouldn't want to say, as this judge did, you've got 2 weeks to make your case here. I want this guy back, or you've got to tell us everything that you've done in 2 weeks to make sure that you've done everything that you can to bring this guy back. That's another 2 weeks of living in this hellhole, and it's just outrageous because nobody has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he's done anything wrong.
Right. And I think that speaks to, when Scott mentions that we talk about the founding fathers a lot, and, we say, well, the founding fathers could never have imagined this. And Scott's right. They put in guardrails. They didn't construct a throne. They constructed guardrails under an assumption. And I think it was a false assumption. In international relations, one of the first rules, one of the first tenets of international relations are all the actors are reasonable. You make that assumption. All of the actors are reasonable. And the founding fathers, they made that assumption. All of the actors that are going to be in all these positions of government to have these guardrails, they're going to be reasonable. And then along comes Donald Trump and the Donald Trump, show. There's nothing reasonable about it. And that's where the system failed. It was presented with a problem. It was not designed, to be a guardrail against. And that's where their problem basically lies.
So in the other sort of related case to this, Judge Boasberg has decided that he has found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt of court for failing to return the 2 planes deporting migrants to El Salvador last month, the plane that Abrego Garcia was on, and has given them until April 23rd to file a response if they want to purge the contempt. At that point, the court will ultimately put some kind of penalty on the Trump administration for contempt of court. I don't know what that penalty is going to be.
Probably stomping their foot.
It doesn't say here. Yeah.
I mean, what else are they going to do?
Well, I already told you what I would have done.
Well, yeah.
I would take the lawyer who showed up for the Trump administration in front of me, use bad faith arguments as they do to keep this guy there, and I would throw that lawyer in prison until this guy is back on U.S. soil. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm certainly not a judge. I don't know if that's legal or not, but it's got to be just as legal as keeping a not guilty person in a hellhole prison in another country, for no good reason at all. So call it tit for tat if you like. But I certainly would take more action, I think, than the courts have shown themselves willing to do. So it looks like April 23rd, right, is the big day. I don't know, for whatever reason, April 23rd seems to be the day that the federal government needs to come to these two separate judges and explain what they're going to do, or what they've done, or whatever it is. Drew Ensign, who's the Deputy Assistant Attorney General that I would have thrown into prison, has until then to talk about the steps that they've taken in order to get this man back.
What about the higher ups, the Attorney General? I mean, the people who give the orders. I mean, nothing's going to happen to them.
No.
It kind of makes you wonder if Matt Gaetz would have been worse than Pam Bondi is. I think it's fair at this point to ask that question.
Well, yeah.
Because we were all so outraged at the thought of Matt Gaetz being the Attorney General. I'm not sure that he would have been worse than Pam Bondi. Right.
And let's remember, let's take Giuliani and Sidney Powell as two examples. This lawyer who's arguing the case, and Scott's suggestion is, throw him in jail until this guy's back under, and the contempt order. You think anybody in the Trump administration is going to give a damn? It's not them. They don't care. I mean, they didn't care when, Sidney Powell and all the rest of them were, charged down in Georgia. Nobody cared. I mean, it wasn't them. And, that's kind of, these are the fall guys. And, we made mention of this before. This, again, is an MO of the Trump administration. Find a fall guy. And I think that we're going to find that people like Elon Musk, supposedly he's so smart, but if you can't look at taking this job and it's going to be unpopular and you're going to be the fall guy, if you can't figure that out, you're obviously not as smart as people think you are. Because that's track record stuff. So I don't know, but Scott's got a great idea. Let's see what Bozeman does, and how he reacts to it, and what happens. Because at this point in time, again, the founding fathers did not create guardrails for unreasonable actors, and that's what we're into now.
Thank you again, then, to all our listeners, and stay with us, and we will be back with our thoughts. We'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social political issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.